Welcome back to the Forbidden News Update. I'm Chris Matthew. With me is Cory Hughes, and we're back for a new edition. How are you doing, Cory?
Good.
Yeah, today we're going to go over some of the stories that, of course, I feel are important to discuss, things you may not see in the headlines. And Cory is actually going to be discussing the pseudo-pandemic of 1976. So before we get into any of that, I want to thank C60 Purple Power. Taking C60 is the best decision I've made for my health. I feel amazing, and you definitely should too. Just go to their website to check out all the benefits. More energy, better sleep. I've lost weight. I've lost over like 30 pounds. Just click the link in the description to learn more. You get 10% off your order, plus free shipping if you do place an order. First on the agenda tonight, YouTube is cracking down on videos displaying harmful conspiracy theories. Go figure that one. The Google-owned streaming company will now prohibit content that targets a person or group with conspiracy theories that have been used to justify real-world violence. Now, I wonder how they're going to sway that one. They can do that in many ways. YouTube said that means potentially harmful videos, claiming that someone is complicit in one or more proven to be false conspiracies. Now, how do you consider these proven to be false in the first place?
That whole idea of proven to be false is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. They will be taken down starting on October 15th, which was yesterday. Now, I've already been a victim of this before the 15th a few times, and recently, a few days ago, I've had a couple of videos that actually Cory and I made about psychological warfare just disappear. They're gone. So they're posted elsewhere. They're on what, BitChute right now, Cory?
BitChute and LBRY.
Yeah, so they've already started on that crackdown. Now, for an example of the types of content that they want banned, talking about Pizzagate scandal of 2016, which included allegations that Hillary Clinton was involved in running a child sex trafficking ring out of a pizzeria in Washington. The information swiftly spread across the internet, which led to a gunman later opening fire at the restaurant. YouTube says to address this kind of content effectively, it's critical that our team continually review and update our policies and systems to reflect the frequent changes. The news, of course, comes a day after the platform said COVID-19 vaccine misinformation will also be removed. YouTube's effort to come after companies like Twitter and Facebook have set out to crack down on the QAnon extremist conspiracy movement by suspending accounts and taking down posts. Does this sound like Nazi Germany book burning to you, or is it just me? I don't know.
This is worse than Nazi Germany book burning. I'm not going to get into the details on why, but the bottom line is that when you have a channel and you're putting out crazy lunatic kind of stuff, they leave you alone no matter what you say because you look like a lunatic. And so therefore, genuine events in history that are conspiratorial in nature kind of get lost in the shuffle when people come off like a bunch of lunatics, right? Like when people push like the driver shot Kennedy like kind of narrative, like that's crazy, right? So they let people say stuff like that because it's nuts. When it comes to real fact and real truth, they are on point to ban you and remove your content, fundamentally because the government definitely had a role in the launch and start of all these companies. Google, Facebook, there was government involvement from the beginning. And since the government can't censor you, they outsource the censorship to these platforms, right? And so then you have a platform like BitChute that allows people to post whatever they want, really believing in free speech. So what do they do then? Then they ban all links on Twitter to BitChute. So you can't even link to it from these platforms. These platforms want like 1950 style, everyone's happy living. They don't want people to engage in real debate or discussion, because real debate and discussion always leads to outing them as being censors for the government. So yeah, it's going to continue. It's going to get worse. I have no doubts Forbidden Knowledge News channel is going to get hit, even though it hasn't happened yet. The day is coming. So we've been in the process of building out our own platforms. A YouTube style video platform is coming. We've already got the social site up and running. We've got over 300 people using that site now. If you haven't signed up, it's free. Go sign up for the social site. It's forbiddenknowledgenews.online. And help support free speech by engaging with these other platforms. Platforms like DLive and Brand New Tube and LBRY. LBRY is by far the best of all these new video platforms. Completely uncensorable, completely decentralized, no central servers to delete your content from. This is the future. And
yeah, speaking of DLive, we were talking about probably moving all our live streams to DLive instead of YouTube, just because YouTube is fucking awful. So
right, and YouTube killed all the monetization here. So yeah. You know, we end up doing all this content and all this work for free because, well, the information needs to get out there one way or another. But it would be very nice if there was a way for us to, you know, we can't do super chats, we can't do any of that stuff. So if we can move to a platform like DLive, we'll at least have the opportunity to make some money in the process because we spend all of our time doing this.
Yeah, definitely. We are on the move for some new platforms, working on a lot of great stuff. And if you'd like to help support us doing that, we have a space for donations in the description. You can subscribe to our premium site, which is awesome. That always helps. And anything else that you can maybe suggest or offer us, we're always taking suggestions. Just shoot us an email, forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. All right, and to finish up the story here, in July, Twitter began removing and suspending accounts associated with QAnon, of course, a conspiracy group that has supported President Trump. In October, Facebook pledged to remove pages, groups, and Instagram accounts aligned with the conspiracy group, is what they call it, of course. According to a survey of more than 2,000 Americans, it finds a public ready to believe the accuracy of unproven or disproven claims. Now, if you look back at our history books, most of the history that's been written has been disproven or debunked. So think about that for a second. The report, Conspiracy Theories, Misinformation, COVID-19, and the 2020 election. The survey was a collaboration between American Enterprise Institute's Survey Center on American Life and the Center for American Progress. It sheds lights on how widely conspiracy theories have spread among the general public and who remains most susceptible to them. A significant number of Americans appear susceptible to believing unproven claims. It's like they treat us like children, like we can't make decisions on our own. This says Daniel Cox, director of the Survey Center on American Life. Politically motivated conspiracy theories find a receptive audience among both Democrats and Republicans. A majority of Democrats believe Russian President Vladimir Putin has compromising information about Donald Trump, and a nearly equally sized majority of Republicans are convinced there has been a coordinated effort by the unelected government officials to undercut the Trump administration. Now, these conspiracies, whether they're true or not, it's still the fact that they want to censor all the information that could possibly come out about anything. The survey asked Americans to weigh the accuracy of a range of different statements about politics, science, and public health that are demonstrably false or lacking supporting evidence, including that former President Barack Obama was born outside the United States, there was a widespread election fraud in 2016, and that China manufactured COVID-19 in a lab as a part of a bioweapons program, and whether childhood vaccines cause autism. All these conspiracies that are so dangerous for us that we can't even hear about them because we don't have the capability to decide for ourselves whether they're true or not. That's basically what I'm seeing in this, you know.
Yeah, and the one word that catches me by surprise is the word proven, because very little in life and in history can we actually prove. There might be a lot of evidence for things, but there is no proof for a lot of things. Meaning, you can go back and look at things like the O.J. Simpson case. Everybody knows that O.J. Simpson murdered Nicole Brown Simpson, right? Everyone knows it. Is there evidence? Yes. Was there any proof? No proof. Okay, same thing, JonBenet Ramsey. Everyone should know by this point that she was involved in some sort of child trafficking through her father, and that her parents were absolutely involved in her murder. There's a lot of evidence for that. There is no proof. the vast majority of our history, there is no proof for. All we have are anecdotal statements. We have, little bits of evidence here and there. But the vast majority of things that we have come to accept as being reality, you cannot prove. So for them to use that word proven is kind of like setting the bar way too high for any kind of standard. Even if you had absolutely slam dunk proof, that would be the first thing to get censored.
Right.
It was only a couple of years ago that there was a British intelligence officer who was outed as one of the executives at Twitter. I mean, this is not rare. This is how it goes. If they cannot partner with you, they will infiltrate you, right? They will send you the best of the best to come work in a certain position. Of course, you're going to hire them, and the next thing you know, turns out they were working for intelligence. That is their MO. They infiltrate because they cannot negotiate. So, yeah, this is a complete usurping of our rights through getting around the Constitution, because they're saying these are private companies, but these are not private companies. These are government-funded companies. Okay, so that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, it's a very it's kind of a frightening time when it comes to independent journalism and people like us getting this stuff out, because we got to scramble. We got to scramble to get our own stuff going, and that takes money and that takes time. It takes a lot of work, but we have to do it, or we're going to be lost. We're going to be lost in this wave of censorship.
Right, and I want to touch on one more thing real quick.
Yeah,
this is a perfect example of where studying the relationships between people tells you a whole lot more than individual incidents or policies. When you come to see that certain people in Facebook are associating with certain organizations, like they're fact finders, or they're whatever the hell they're called, debunkers, whatever they're called. The original group that was picked up by Facebook was one that was once led by Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger is probably one of the biggest scumbags to ever walk the earth. He was at the tip of the spear of disinformation between the government and the American people. So when they're using known disinformation agents to function as fact checkers, the nuts are running the nut house is really what it comes down to. And so there's zero credibility there whatsoever. And so the idea, in my opinion, is not so much to fight against this as it is to straight up just go around them and create our own platforms, or use alternative platforms that can reach a wider audience.
Definitely.
Yeah, every single comment I ever make on Twitter is automatically put into the shadow ban. You have to click for more comments, like 100%.
Yeah.
So it's very frustrating.
It is frustrating. And to finish this article up, at a time of waning confidence in public institutions, the survey finds that most Americans believe that major industries, government, and the media do not disclose information relevant to the public interest. A majority of Americans believe that the federal government, drug companies, technology companies, and major news organizations regularly withhold information that pertain to public health or welfare. Well, of course they do. Because so many of these so-called conspiracy theories, they actually, many of them are true. And we've come to find this out in recent years. According to them, American society faces a genuine crisis in public trust in government, corporations, and the media. Really? I wonder why. Exacerbated by wide partisan divides about who and what to believe. This is said by John Halpin, a CAP senior fellow and author of the report, said if we can't agree on basic facts about what is going on in our country, there is little hope of generating consensus on what needs to be done to control the pandemic and fix our country. Rebuilding public trust in major institutions and the information they provide the public is now priority. Yeah, I'm sure that is. The survey also reveals widespread misinformation about COVID-19 that is not pronouncing among Republicans. Close to half, which is 48% of Republicans and 25% of Democrats, say COVID-19 is no more dangerous than the flu. More than 4 in 10 Republicans believe that hydroxychloroquine is a safe and effective way to treat COVID. Americans express a considerable hesitation when receiving a COVID-19 vaccine. Fewer than half Americans say they would be willing to take an FDA-approved vaccine for COVID, And among those who say they would not get a vaccine, safety topped the first list of concerns. According to these reports, 4 in 10 Americans are familiar with the QAnon conspiracy, and only 16% of Americans who have heard or read at least a little about the conspiracies say that they're accurate. Now, I admit that there are a shit ton of conspiracies going around on social media that are extremely ridiculous, and you should not give them the time of day. But at the same time, there's a lot of people who are just trying to get good information out there, and there is good information out there. You just gotta know how to find it, and go with your instincts on that. So YouTube crackdown. Leave any comments in the chat. Any questions you have about that? How do you feel about YouTube just taking it upon themselves to remove anything that they deem harmful for us because we can't decide for ourselves, basically? Any thoughts, final thoughts on that, Cory, before I move on to the next story?
Well, yeah, because they removed my psychological warfare oranges and applications videos from YouTube. It took about 2 months.
Yeah.
Which was a miracle they lasted that long. But the only thing I presented in those videos was absolute proof of deception of the official story, right? So none of their rules apply to that, because I showed historical events and I showed how they were wrong, and I showed the proof that they were wrong. I mean, I'll debate that subject with anybody. But that doesn't seem to be good enough, because it tells a story that they don't like. And, most people don't realize, like, all these people are genuinely interconnected. So you've got people from PayPal and from Google who are directly tied to Epstein, right? You've got the CEO of YouTube today. Her father was a physicist who was directly connected to Dimona, which was the nuclear plant in the Negev Desert in Israel. Right. That's why you can't really have anything up there that talks about Kennedy and Dimona, because her father was directly connected to that. Right. And the whole thing was a big cover up. That was why Kennedy was killed in the first place. So you have conflicts of interest at the highest levels. You've got outright hypocrisy, and you have basically them just making the rules up as they go along. And this is just unacceptable. And this is why there needs to be antitrust laws enforced against all these big companies. They really need to smash these companies down to not having such say over what Americans want to discuss.
Yeah, I think.
Now, if we're wrong and we're stupid, we're Americans. We have that right. We have the right to be wrong and stupid.
We definitely should have the right to be stupid. I think the whole system needs to be torn down and rebuilt from the bottom. But
yes, with flames and guns and machetes and guillotines, lots of them.
It's gonna take something big. All right, next. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates on Wednesday warned that the coronavirus pandemic could make the fall worse than the summer. Of course it will. Gates has been outspoken in his thoughts and advice regarding COVID-19, as well as his criticism of the government's handling of the virus. He predicted in 2015 that the world was not prepared for a pandemic. He predicted a lot of things regarding this pandemic. He says the fall is going to be worse than the summer. When asked what the government should do, he says the right course of COVID-19, all the numbers are ticking up. That was always a very good chance that people go indoors and it's colder, that we would see more let me start that over. He said when asked what the government should do, the right course of action for COVID-19, all the numbers are ticking up, and that was always a very good chance that as people go indoors and it's colder, that we would see more transmission. He continued to say that until the U.S. has developed and starts actively distributing antibodies and a vaccine, likely by the first half of 2021, all we have is our behavior, including masks and social distancing. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of fatigue and a lot of bad messages about these things, he said, adding that U.S. mask compliance is actually pretty poor. And we went over that the other day in our previous report. Cory did a great report on the whole numbers and mask thing and how it's completely ineffective and ridiculous. Bill Gates says Trump's coronavirus treatment won't work for everyone and shouldn't be called a cure. He said rich countries should be close to normal by late 2021 if the vaccine works. The United States is looking at 6 potential vaccines, 2 of which have entered phase 3 trials. Vice presidential candidate Senator Kamala Harris has reportedly said that she would not trust President Trump if he encouraged people to get a vaccine, but that she would trust experts like National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease Director Dr. Anthony Fauci. Gates went on to praise the government for the timely stimulus plan that was passed and to ensure the bottom didn't fall out in the economy, as well as the money that was given to researchers to study the virus and create a vaccine and antibodies. Now, I don't know about you, but I am definitely not going to be one of those that will take a vaccine, especially one that is rushed into because of a bunch of psychological fakery. What are your thoughts on that, Cory?
Well, the pandemic's over. If you look at their own numbers,
Right.
we're back to the levels we were before the pandemic started. This whole thing is a bunch of fakery. When you look at the effectiveness of a vaccine, on the CDC's own website, it says that the effectiveness of a vaccine is about 40% and should last about a year. But then they go on to say how these coronavirus types are constantly mutating, and that's why you can't just get one vaccine, you're good forever. There are certain diseases that we get that you can get one vaccine and you're good for life, but not coronaviruses. They change too much. And I'll stipulate that coronavirus is probably a real virus. But I believe that the numbers have been completely faked. The flu numbers were downplayed, and most of the deaths that were associated were because of the flu, which is really probably this year the worst it's ever been in history of the country. So I'm definitely not taking a vaccine because they don't even know if it's going to work. And if it does work, it'll work for a short period of time. And I'm not overly worried about it. You know, I don't know anybody who's gotten sick from coronavirus. I don't know anybody who's died. I don't know anybody who knows anybody who's died. This thing is bogus.
And Bill Gates, you know, last thing I remember, he was a big computer guy, and now he's a medical professional who.
Well, you see, Bill Gates he comes from a really dark family. His father was involved with Planned Parenthood in the beginning, which is their sole purpose really was to trim back the black population in this country. That's pretty much not even a secret anymore. His father was definitely connected to all these like Illuminati types, right? So it's not like he's some random guy who had a computer company. He was almost set up to have that position. Yeah, there's a lot more to Bill Gates than people realize.
Yeah, and he's now in charge of the health and welfare of the whole country. So yeah, vaccine definitely not for me. Any comments or questions you have about that, leave those in the chat. On to my next one. While 85% of Americans surveyed believe that at least one major tech company spies on its users, 68% believe Facebook ranks at the top when it comes to spying on its users. Whistleout, which is a search engine that helps consumers compare internet services, surveyed 1,000 people about their beliefs when it comes to major tech companies and spying practices. The participants, who were age 16 and older, were located in 50 states. 18% of the respondents admitted they have stopped using or have deleted Facebook due to privacy concerns, and 40% that they have done the same with TikTok, which I am not a user of. 1 in 5 respondents say that U.S. should ban Facebook, and 2 in 5 say that U.S. should ban TikTok. About 53% of Americans believe TikTok spies on its users. About 13% of participants believe Instagram should be banned. More half of Americans, 57% think at least one tech company should be banned in the U.S. because of privacy concerns and that the government should intervene. It's widely known that companies collect data for advertising and marketing purposes, but 80% of Americans think that at least one tech company listens to their conversations. They believe this because 2/3 of respondents say they were served for an ad for a specific product that they have talked about but never searched for online, leading me to conclude that big tech is listening to their conversations. And some of the companies that consumers think listen in most, which at the top of the list is Facebook at 55%. Then you got 40 TikTok, 39 Google, 32% Amazon. The list goes on and on. 26% YouTube, 26% Snapchat, So, yeah, I definitely think there is a huge amount of spying going on. I think that they do record our conversations, and it is highly possible that they're using our conversations to not only serve us ads, but to gain information for our wonderful CIA. What do you think about that, Cory?
Yeah, Facebook not only reads but sells your private messages to companies. That is not even secret anymore. So anything you've ever written in a Facebook message to a friend has been sold to a company. That is, I believe, an egregious overstepping. That is violations of our most intimate privacies. These companies all need to have people rot in prison, but they won't, because these people are connected to the same lattice structure of tyrants that run the government. So it'll never happen. These are their pet projects, right? Where do you think all the billions of dollars came from? Came from government funding or people who fund projects surrounding government projects. Yeah, it's absolutely atrocious.
And right now, there's all this talk that they're trying to rein them in and end the kind of monopoly that they have in the spying and privacy issues. But I really don't see that going anywhere. I just see more of the same continuing. And that, in fact, I think it's actually probably going to get worse in the future.
Yeah, and so the last place that I had lived, I ordered some packages from Amazon. Within a couple of days, I got a notice from the USPS, the post office, telling me that they registered my new address and they need verification to do mail forwarding. I never put that in with the post office. Amazon gave my information to the government to let them know that my address had been updated. So wow. That's another egregious overstepping. And then when you look at people like Jeff Bezos, who control the Washington Post, controls Amazon, and he sits on a Pentagon board, and he has a $600 million deal with the CIA, because the CIA's infrastructure is built on Amazon servers, right? They needed somebody who could handle the tech. Bezos and his crew could handle the tech. And so the way I see it is they needed such a large infrastructure that they had to bring him into their little cabal. They didn't have a choice. They needed to know they could trust him with the highest of top secret data. So that is why. And he's not some like wolf in sheep's clothing to them. He is all on board with the public narrative and, going along. He's the richest man in the world, like 50-60 billion dollars at this point. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is quite ridiculous. And the spying and invasiveness, I believe it's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. We have quite an interesting future ahead of us when it comes to this technology. My last story today, the U.S. Navy recently admitted, of course, that strangely behaving objects caught on video by jet pilots over the years are genuine, unexplained phenomenon. There are eyewitness accounts not only from pilots, but radar operations and technicians too. And like I mentioned in the last report in August, the Navy established an unidentified and aerial phenomena task force to investigate the nature and origin of these odd sightings and determine if they could potentially pose a threat to new U.S. national security. The recently observed UAPs reportedly have incredible accelerations, far higher than a human pilot could survive. There's no air disturbance available. They don't produce sonic booms, but there's also a rising call for this phenomenon to be studied scientifically, even using satellites to be on the lookout for possible UAP events. Now, my thing with no human could survive these. If they're drones, there's no need for a human, but that's getting into a different thing altogether. Now, I think this is how you pronounce his name. Philippe Alaris is a project controller at the European Space Agency's Space Research and Technology Center in the Netherlands. He is also the primary force behind the Unidentified Aerospace Phenomena Observations Reporting Scheme, a project to facilitate the collection of UAP reports from both amateur and professional astronomers. He believed that there is a need for scientific study of UAPs and a requirement to assemble reliable evidence, something that could not be so easily ignored by science. It is necessary to bring scientists objective and high-quality data. No one knows where and when a UAP can potentially appear, hence the difficulty of scientific research in this domain. Recent years have seen rapid advances in information and communication technologies. For example, open tool software, cloud computing, artificial intelligence with machine and deep learning. These tools offer scientists new possibilities to collect, store, manipulate, and transmit data, as well as the location of our overhead satellites. And it's the perfect chance to potentially detect something. He said there are more and more Earth scanning spacecraft being launched to take the pulse of our globe. Such work is no longer limited to major countries or powers. He said private actors have also entered the planet viewing scene, which I believe is the most important thing. Is we don't need these government entities or corporate entities trying to do this research. We need more people in the private sector, because I definitely believe there'd be more honesty in that. Working with Alaris to employ satellite imagery to detect and monitor UAPs is Kevin Newth, a former scientist with NASA's Ames Research Center in California, Silicon Valley. He is now an associate professor of physics at the University at Albany in New York, and they are looking into using satellites to monitor the region of the ocean of South Catalina Island, where the 2004 Nimitz encounter occurred. Newth said, referring to the UAP sightings report by pilots and radar operations based aboard the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz, that area will also be the target for a 2021 UAP expedition carried out by Newth and other researchers. The goal is to provide scientific evidence that UAP objects are real, UAP objects are findable, and they're knowable. The UAPX team includes military veterans and physicists, as well as research scientists and trained observers that will use specialized gear to observe any would-be UAP. They are hoping to detect UAPs, determine their characteristics, flight patterns, and any patterns in activity that will allow us to study them more effectively. In addition to monitoring a region for UAPs, they're also looking into using satellites to obtain independent confirmation of a prominent UAP sighting and obtain quantifiable information about those UAPs. Ravi Kapaparu is a planetary scientist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, which NASA, of course, I don't trust any information coming out of them. He is out of the Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. He studies planetary habitability, climate modeling, and chemistry in the context of exoplanet atmosphere characterization. He views the UFO UAP phenomenon as a scientifically interesting problem, which is driven part by observations that seem to defy the laws of physics. He said he's wary of bringing the term extraterrestrial into the conversation. That's because there is no absolutely concrete evidence that points to them as being extraterrestrial. He also believes the entire UAP topic has been much maligned by being associated with ET. This association prevents a thorough scientific investigation by the science community, and he feels essentially because it's a taboo subject, basically. He think people immediately thinks about aliens when they hear of UFOs and UAPs, and of course, most people do. He wants scientists not to fall for that. Him and like-minded colleagues are proposing a completely unbiased, agnostic approach to the UAP. He said, let the data lead us to what they are and what they could be. Now, back in the late 40s and 50s, we had a UFO uptick in craze where the mainstream media was talking about it. The government was talking about it. We had Project Blue Book. And then after Project Blue Book, they kind of shut everything down and it was quiet for years. Now in 2017, all of a sudden we have this all new huge uptick in UFO information on the media, on the news, the Pentagon talking about materials, everything. Everybody's talking about UFOs. It's real easy to find a UFO or alien story in the news nowadays. So my question is, why now? Is there some reason that they're kind of resurrecting this whole UFO thing into the mainstream? Or is it just another kind of trend that we're going to see an uptick in for a little while, or is it going to go away? Or is there some other reason that they feel like we need to be talking about this right now? So anybody have any comments or questions about that? Leave that in the chat. Any thoughts on that, Cory?
No, they don't tell us the truth about anything, ever. So just keep that in mind. When they're telling you something,
right,
they're lying.
Yeah, when the source is the government or the media or these mainstream scientists, I don't trust them. But I am kind of interested that they're trying to get some independent researchers in on this and using satellites to determine it. Who knows where it's going to take them? Who knows what they'll find out, if it's going to be just a bunch of BS or if they'll find something real and concrete, and then the government gets hands on it and shuts it all down or spins it and turns it into something else. We will never know. So once again, we're back to square one with UFOs, and I guess it's going to be up to us and researchers like us to find out what is really going on. And that is the end of my segment, and I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Cory. Let me turn on, you have slides to share?
Yes.
Okay, let me turn on your screen share here. All right, you're ready to go.
Okay, so basically I want to cover some of the past scare tactics and debacles that have happened when it comes to influenza or these coronavirus type viruses. When you go back to like the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, you had what was called the Hong Kong flu. The Hong Kong flu, also known as the 1968 flu pandemic, was a flu pandemic whose outbreak in 68 and 69 killed an estimated 1 to 4 million people globally. It was caused by an H3N2 strain of the influenza A virus, which is descended from H2N2 through antigenic shift, a genetic process in which genes from multiple subtypes are reassorted to form a new virus. So this was really heavy in 68, 69, but this article here, the Hong Kong flu virus dying out, this article came out in the 1970s. So they dragged this thing on and on, and the scare tactics for years and years and years, up until they had something else to replace it with. So July 1st, 1970, that's really the first reports of coronavirus. And really, when you go back and you read through the original articles, it doesn't really talk about coronaviruses affecting us as much as it does livestock. There was a wide livestock outbreak in the late 60s, early 70s that they finally attributed to coronaviruses. And the vast majority of articles that you find going back that far are in reference to calves, mostly calves and pigs and other barnyard type animals who are in close contact with each other, having contracted coronaviruses. So up until now, really, coronaviruses are not something that have ever been seen as something deadly that will kill you. Of course, they lead to pneumonia in some cases, and it's always the same people who are getting sick and dying. It's always the old. It's always the people who have pre-existing conditions, pre-existing, diabetes or heart disease or diabetes, whatever. It's the average person generally never has anything to fear from coronavirus other than maybe a cough or a sniffle. This I thought was pretty interesting. I found a bunch of articles going back to late 75 that basically they started to really track the coronavirus and the flu through a lab in Houston. And Houston, every time I see Houston pop up in anything, is always some sort of eerie overtones. Houston was like the second place that the Kennedy assassination was plotted in, next to New Orleans. And so whenever I think of Houston, there's a lot of dark forces in there. There's a lot of big money, a lot of oil money, which usually funds all this stuff. So which tells me there's always usually some sort of agenda behind what they're doing. But yeah, the tracking of coronavirus, particularly in the modern era, started in the mid-70s in Houston. So they keep finding these new viruses, right? So this is nothing new. They say that this year was a big deal because it was a novel coronavirus. Well, last year there were 4 novel coronaviruses that pretty much went under the radar. No one really ever talked about it because it really wasn't a big deal, right? It didn't meet their timing on when they needed a pandemic. So those 4 novel coronaviruses are unspoken. But yeah, here in 1975, laboratory test support theory of new flu virus. They've kind of estimated that every 10 to 14 years we have some sort of pandemic, and each one is caused by a new strain of coronavirus. Here it says, recent laboratory experiments have lent support to the theory that global epidemics of influenza occur after an entirely new flu virus is created by the natural recombining of fragments of mammal, bird, and human virus strains, perhaps within an animal population. I'm sure there is some truth to that, but another truth is that we can't seem to get something without trying to stick our fingers in it, right? So every single one of these viruses that we get, they have schmucks in a lab somewhere making it more viral so they can study it. In 2015, Ralph Baric started working on bat-related coronavirus out of China, funded by Beth Israel Hospital. And basically what he had to do was the initial strain was not strong enough to infect humans. So he had to make it stronger so it could become infectious so he could study it in the laboratory. Okay, I have no doubts that the current COVID-19 pseudo-epidemic that we're all experiencing is a product of exactly this, making a virus more virulent so it can be studied in a lab, and then it was released. These are more scare tactics from January 76. It's official. The bug that has us in its grip. Basically, this is just some information on the 76 pseudo pandemic, which we'll get to in a second. This has been them basically kind of seasoning everyone, letting everyone know that, hey, the flu is coming. It's going to be bad. Here we go. Emergency rooms are crammed. The results of the hospital emergency room survey were similar. The 9 hospitals included in the study usually see 14,000 emergency room patients a day, but as of this week, the number was up to 17,000. Okay, they don't tell you why it was up to 17,000. They just lead you to assume it was because of the flu, which it probably was not. Statistics can always be skewed. But this is just another example of them putting out articles in order to kind of spread fear and panic throughout a society and to prep you for what is coming. So new flu pandemic expected in 79. And this article I thought was pretty interesting because this talks about the effectiveness of vaccines. And even back then, vaccines were expected to be about 70 to 90% effective for 1 year. These vaccines have never been systematically or widely used during pandemics. If only individuals abnormally susceptible to fatal complications, those over 65 years of age or with cardiac or pulmonary disease, were selectively immunized, many of the predictable thousands of deaths and millions of illnesses could be prevented. So basically, they're telling you right here things that are going on today, right? Those over 65 are who's susceptible. Cardiac or pulmonary disease, that's who's susceptible. That's who's susceptible to every damn flu, right? And as we've seen, 95% of the deaths were over age 50. So, but yeah, every 10 to 14 years, they expect a pandemic of sorts to go around. I guess they said the end of every decade of the 20th century has been marred with some kind of viral epidemic. And this is just showing an example of what they were talking about back then. I like the little cartoon they have here. Flew to the starboard, man the harpoons, fill them with vaccine, get the captain, hurry. And they kind of, they made viruses look like these hands coming up out of the ocean. They're not even bothering to give us that today. We have no visuals other than these damn masks. So the next thing we're going to talk about is 1976, the pseudo pandemic. On February 4th, 76, a young soldier named David Lewis died of a new form of flu. In the middle of the month, F. David Matthews, the U.S. Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, announced that an epidemic of the flu that killed Private Lewis was due in the fall. The indication is that we see a return of the 1918 flu virus that is the most virulent form of the flu, he said, reports Patrick de Justo for Salon. He went on, the 1918 outbreak of Spanish flu killed 500,000 Americans, and the upcoming apocalypse was expected to kill 1 million. The earlier pandemic was another form of swine flu, de Justo writes, and researchers at the Centers for Disease Control thought that what was happening could be a new, even deadlier strain than was genetically close to the 1918 strain. To avoid an epidemic, the CDC believed that at least 80% of the United States population would need to be vaccinated. 80%. When they asked Congress for the money to do it, politicians jumped on the potential good press of saving their constituents from the plague, de Justo writes. So as you can see, politicians do things because of the optics. It looks good for them, right? So, oh my God, 10 people got sick this week. We got to put the masks back on, right? It's all just they're telescoping what they're doing, right? So the bottom line is they're acts of symbolism that mean nothing, that they interpret as will look good for them in the next election. I hope it backfires on every last one of these criminals. So then you have the flu outbreak as reported. National Center for Disease Control has reported an outbreak of influenza in humans similar to the virus found in swine, and recalling the flu of a half-century ago that killed 500,000 Americans and 20 million persons worldwide. The CDC spokesman said Thursday there is no immediate cause for alarm. Didn't we get that in the beginning? No immediate cause for alarm. You don't need masks. The CDC spokesman said there was no immediate cause for alarm and that any major outbreaks of the disease could be controlled by modern vaccines. That's an outright lie. But he said precautionary steps are being taken, including consultation with the World Health Organization. An Army recruit died February 4th in an outbreak of the new influenza, a strain which affected 5 persons at Fort Dix, New Jersey, all on an Army base, by the way, said Dr. H. Bruce Dull, Assistant Director for the Programs for the CDC. The spokesman at Fort Dix said the recruit was David Lewis, 19, of Ashley Falls, Massachusetts. He said 4 other soldiers have been hospitalized with the flu. So you have 5 people here. 5 people got sick. 1 died. Who knows what kind of pre-existing conditions there were? On the little bit of research I did on this, it seemed as though these new recruits were in the midst of some sort of new recruit training, extremely physically exhaustive, going out in the woods for days at a time. Who knows what they were exposed to out there. But only 1 person died. 5 people got sick. You can read some other articles that say another 80 people were put into observation. But at the end of the day, it seems as though only about 5 people were sick, with 1 death. More articles basically showing that the killer flu is back in the U.S. Question mark. It should be a big question mark because they didn't know, and this was all speculation. And this all happened between February and April of 1976. So over a 2-month period, they basically did what they did today. They just kind of flipped the switch and, oh my God, the flu is going to kill us all. It's a new deadlier flu. We don't know what it is. Here they talk about the reasons for the alert. Another expert says that some evidence suggests that the Great Flu Pandemic of 1918-19 was caused by a virus related to that of swine influenza. That's all they would really tell people, is that the flu that this guy died from and that 5 people got sick from was swine flu. Dull and Dr. Walter R. Dowdle of CDC Virology Division said there's little danger of any wildfire epidemic of a newly found virus this season. Well, see, they flipped the script really quickly because they try to downplay everything in the beginning so nobody panics. And then, oh my God, everybody should panic. It's really kind of a strange pattern that they follow. And here they're talking about how the flu virus displays amazing adaptability, right? So they basically debunk any kind of need for a vaccine by saying it mutates too often in order to get it down. So one thing I never realized about vaccines is when you get hit with a vaccine, they are vaccinating you against very specific strains of the flu. So they might hit you with 1 shot that has let's use the number 10. Let's say that it can target 10 different strains of the flu. Well, that's because it has 10 different antibodies in it, and they're hoping that the flu virus you have is closely related to one of those, so that perhaps one out of those 10 antibodies that they hit you with actually is able to fight it off. It is obviously a long-term failed experiment if only 40% of flu vaccines are effective. And if they're effective, how do you know they're effective? How do you know that the flu vaccine worked and you just didn't get exposed to a virulent strain of the flu? There's no way to know that. So I say that 40% number is probably even lower. It's probably closer to 20, 25%. Okay, so here we are, April 18th, 1976. The race to immunize 200 million Americans by fall. So remember, so far they have 1 death and they have 5 sick total on an Army base in New Jersey. So let me go ahead and read this to you. On February 4th, a young recruit collapsed and died at Fort Dix, a victim of influenza epidemic at the New Jersey Army base. Because of that Fort Dix epidemic, the American people are heading into the greatest public health exercise in human history, an effort to immunize more than 200 million Americans against the flu before winter of 76-77 arrives, okay? So to really develop from scratch a vaccine that works, it takes 3 to 4 years. That's reality. That's starting with nothing. But when you listen to these guys today talk, and when you look at what they were trying to do back then, they were trying to take the body of research that they currently had and apply it to a new strain which they knew nothing about. Okay, so there is no hope of a real vaccine coming for COVID, if there is a COVID, because it takes far too long. And when you look at the interviews, the modern interviews of people from the CDC or whoever this sham doctor is, that is the new virus czar that Trump appointed, who refused to give up any of his holdings in any of his companies that are working on vaccines, right? They will basically tell you that they are throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at it in hopes that something will work. They say that they have foundations that they can build upon and just modify for new viruses, which is an outright lie. That's not how this stuff works. So, but here we go. We go from February to April. We get 2 months, and all of a sudden it goes from, it's not a big deal, to, oh my God, we need to immunize everybody in the country. Now, about 50 million people actually did go out and get vaccinated for this. 50 million. That's a lot of people. That's 25% of the country went out and got all these vaccines, new vaccines, and they got them in October, right? So you have a new virus comes up in February, never seen before, similar to swine flu. In October, they have a vaccine, right? So what is that, like 7, 8 months?
That sounds very similar to what's going on right now.
Exactly. Like history repeats itself, right? And all the dumb fucks out there need to pay close attention to history, because history has all the answers on what's coming tomorrow. So basically, this is another article, swine type influenza virus, watch closely. They keep calling it a swine type influenza. Here they compare it to a World War I bug. Disease control officials are keeping a close eye on the new strain of influenza virus. It may be related to the bug responsible for the disastrous epidemic just after World War I, in which 20 million Americans were stricken and 500,000 died, talking about the 1918 Spanish flu. To date, the new virus has surfaced only at Fort Dix, New Jersey, where it killed 1 of the 4 persons it struck in the mini epidemic. It started late January and ended this month. Okay, extremely important that it is only shown at the Fort Dix, New Jersey Army base. In the spring of '76, it looked like that year's flu was the real thing. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. And rushed response led to a medical debacle that hasn't gone away. Some of the American public's hesitance to embrace vaccines, the flu vaccine in particular, can be attributed to the long-lasting effects of the failed 1976 campaign to mass vaccinate the public against a strain of the swine flu virus, writes Rebecca Creston for Discover. This government-led campaign was widely viewed as a debacle and put an irreparable dent in the future public health initiative, as well as negatively influenced the public's perception of both the flu and the flu shot in this country. So one of the things this thing did was it caused what was called Guillain-Barré disease, and it is a neurological disorder. It's basically, if you were able to walk, you couldn't walk anymore. Had to be in a wheelchair. Your muscles would spasm. You could not stand on your legs. They would give out. It was a real big deal. And they discovered this before the end of the year. So the shots went out in October. By November, they already had this, was pretty well documented that this was causing this to happen to people. People got shot with the flu one day, and 2 days later, they couldn't get out of bed. Didn't know why. Ended up costing the government hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions. So the World Health Organization adopted more of a wait-and-see attitude to the virus, writes Creston. They eventually found the strain of flu that year was not a repeat or escalation of the 1918 flu, but the U.S. government was unstoppable, DeGusto writes. They had promised a vaccine, so there needed to be a vaccine. This all happened in the spring, with emergency legislation for the National Swine Flu Immunization Program being signed into effect by mid-April. By the time immunizations began October 1st, though, the proposed epidemic had failed to emerge, although Legionnaire's disease had, confusing matters further. With President Ford's re-election campaign looming on the horizon, the campaign increasingly appeared politically motivated. Creston writes, in the end, one journalist of the New York Times went so far as to call the whole thing a fiasco. Epidemiology takes time. Politics is more often about looking like you're doing something, and logistics between branches of government are extremely complicated. These factors all contributed to the pandemic that never was. The real victims of this pandemic were likely the 450-odd people, over 4,000 cases reported adverse effects, who came down with Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare neurological disorder, after getting the flu shot in '76. Now, these were the final numbers. This is what it came down to. Total cases found in the U.S. outside of Fort Dix, 0. Americans vaccinated due to scare tactics, 50 million. Americans suffered neurological disorders, over 4,000, and Americans suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, 450. So they created a massive scare over nothing at all. I was born in March of '76. And thank God my parents were not dumb enough to take this vaccine. They were never big on vaccines, and I thank them for that in hindsight. But what's going on today is exactly lock and step with what happened back in '76, but they think that you people have short memories. And so that's all I wanted to share today, but that information is extremely important. I highly recommend you go out and you research that incident, the pseudo pandemic of '76. It's often referred to as the swine flu pandemic of '76, but it was a complete dud. And to this very day, nobody knows what exactly killed that guy on that base or if there was ever any kind of outbreak whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, even though the numbers are nothing compared to what we're seeing today, it's the exact same thing, the exact same tactics. It seems like they just picked this year for some reason. But now we have a much more wide-reaching media. We have social media, and they can easily manipulate it. They've really gotten good with their psychological warfare, although, like you said recently, I think they've been kind of slipping lately.
Yep.
The younger generation's not as smart as they used to be. So it's a big op. The extent of the danger of the actual pandemic is, of course, unknown because of all the misinformation going around. Whether it's a real threat or not, how dangerous it is, no one really knows. But it seems to be another dud on a larger scale. So it just makes me wonder, are they done with it after election, or will we see more? Because the pandemic, like you said, like we can see in the numbers, like we can see in the charts, it's over. There's no more pandemic. So what is going on right now?
That's a really good question. And when you look at the charts, especially in places like New York's numbers for this COVID-19, beginning of July, they dropped to nothing. They had their first little teeny tiny little bump in the meter this week. And so obviously everything we've heard for the last couple of months has been complete lies. Numbers have been down, down, down. They wouldn't have to include all the gunshots and car crashes and all that stuff, which were about 40% of the numbers, still are about 40% numbers. This is a large-scale psychological warfare campaign directed at us. And all the things I've ever harped on before, go back and read the doctrine regarding rumors, go back and read some of that early OSS documents and the methodologies on how they implement fear tactics to the public. And it's all out there, right? And so, I called this thing BS day one because I saw in one day all the conflicting stories. I saw all the patterns from the psych warfare stuff, and that's exactly how I knew this thing was bunk. I didn't even need to know anything else. I could just stop right there. When you see patterns of psych warfare, guess what? It's psych warfare. So, but psych warfare is a difficult concept to wrap your head around, and so it really takes time to go in and come to understand it, and come to understand why governments want to manipulate their own people in any direction, right? So it's very important. And fortunately, lately, I've seen a couple different random YouTube or BitChute or podcasts pop up talking about the OSS and psych warfare, and I was stoked. I was stoked to see more people discussing it. It's the single most important era of our history because it led to what we are living under today.
Yeah, I agree. And like we said earlier, support your independent platforms, independent media, journalists, people who are out there doing the same thing we are. Check out our podcasts on Apple, all your popular podcast platforms, leave a review, and become a premium member at forbiddenknowledgenews. And also, I have a show tonight at 8:30 p.m. Central Time with Tom Dongo, and I will see you all then. Until then, I'll see you later.